So, Ezekiel 21 to 22. So, Ezekiel started out prophesying against Israel, telling them that God was against them, and he was against them with a sword of judgment. And this was towards both the righteous and the wicked. Now, I read that and I was a bit perplexed, and I'm sure you were too. Like, why the righteous? Well, turns out there were no righteous people. But we'll get to that. God commanded Ezekiel to perform some sign acts, including public mourning. He told him to go around groaning and mourning, and when the people asked him, he should tell them why. And that was to demonstrate what was coming. And then he asked him to actually use a sharpened and polished sword and strike it to demonstrate the sword of judgment that was coming. And then he was readying that sword for judgment against them. And then finally, he marked out a fork in the road on a highway coming out of Babylon, with one path leading to Jerusalem and the other leading to the land of the Ammonites. And so from that chapter, at first it was a bit confusing, but it turns out that King Nebuchadnezzar was it was like a foreshadowing or a foretelling of King Nebuchadnezzar trying to figure out which of the two nations to attack first, or the two cities. So apparently he used divination. He said something about looking at liver. I was like, yeah. But then obviously that's like divination to decide. And then obviously the lot fell to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was attacked first. However, God also used King Nebuchadnezzar to judge the Ammonites because they too were guilty of sin. Obviously, they had been listening to false prophecy that was prophesying of their protection, whereas they had been marked for judgment by the Lord. Chapter 22 details Jerusalem's sins, and reading through all the things that were like the detail, I was like, yeah, no wonder God considered them worse than Sodom. They were doing too much. And as God's chosen people, I don't think he was going to, not I don't think, obviously he was not going to sit down and watch them just deteriorate and just get worse, because for years and years their sin had been going from bad to worse, and obviously the time had come for murder, for judgment. Well, you see why I said murder was because the next line here was that he actually called them a bloody city. He called Jerusalem a bloody city because they had shed so much blood. And the consequence for murder, as we know, is death. So that was it. And it's ironic also to find out that the pagan nations that surrounded Jerusalem had even started to scorn them, look at them and shake their head. They even started to hate them because the magnitude of their sin and their wickedness was so much that even the pagans were like, no, these people are doing too much. And God compared them to dross. Dross are the impurities that arise from the process of refining silver. And he says that as dross, he was going to burn them up. Now, in chapter 22, verse 30 to 33, that's where we see the real reason why Israel was worse than Sodom. And remember in the beginning when he said, I will strike both the righteous and the wicked, because the righteous didn't even exist at all. Now, if you remember, when God wanted to destroy Sodom, he said, he asked for 10, 9, till he got one person, which was Lot. So God looked for one righteous person to stand in the gap on behalf of Israel, and he could find none at all. At least in Sodom, he found Lot and his daughters, who didn't end up being righteous at the end of the day. However, he saved them and still destroyed the city because he knew. But here, he couldn't find anyone, which was why they all had to suffer the judgment. Now, here's my hashtag getting to know God lesson. God truly hates sin. Sin mars God's glory. It mars his children. So even as we as God's children, we are marred by sin. And God is too holy to behold sin. But besides that, or despite that, he's able to see beyond our sin to our righteousness, because that righteousness has been brought for us by Jesus, and it was given to us through his sacrifice on the cross of Calvary. So even though he hates sin, he doesn't hate us because of the sins, just because of our status as redeemed children of his, because Jesus has given us right standing before him. So when he looks upon us, he actually sees the righteousness of Christ for those of us who have accepted Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says it best. It says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So I am the righteousness of God in Christ. You are the righteousness of God in Christ. When God looks at us, he doesn't see our sin. He doesn't see filthiness. He doesn't see the thing he hates. Instead, he sees the child that he loves, because we are made righteous through the Son that he loved to redeem us. I think that's the best lesson that I've learned today, and that's all I need to know. Thank you for joining me here today, and we'll continue tomorrow. We're gradually progressing through Ezekiel, and I cannot wait to share with you what the lessons are tomorrow. See you here. Have a good day. Bye, and God bless you.